Welcome back, everyone, and welcome towards our closing session for the day. Over this last day, you've learned a variety of different topics. We looked at big data in healthcare. We looked at big data in ag tech. You looked at how do you build your first machine learning algorithms in the workshops. It is my great pleasure to end today's session with hearing from somebody who is going to learn us all about data literacy and how you can get started with that. Join me in welcoming Jordan Morrow, who is going to be presenting today all the way from the United States, from Utah. And Jordan is more famously known as the Godfather of Data Literacy. And that's not a term that I made up. He has helped pioneer the fields by building one of the world's first data literacy programs and driving thought leadership. Jordan is the head of data skills at Pluralsight and a global trailblazer in the world of data literacy, written multiple books on the topic, which I strongly recommend. As I mentioned earlier, one of our sponsors for today is Cope & Page, so you can buy all of his books today and tomorrow with a 25% discount code, as I shared earlier with you this morning. Besides doing a lot of writing and lecturing, obviously, Jordan is also happily married with 5 kids. I don't know how you do it, and is an avid trail runner and loves fitness, entering and racing in multiple ultra marathons. It's really a truly great pleasure to have you today, Jordan. The floor is yours, so take them away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you to Enterprise Big Data Framework and everybody for getting me involved today. Hopefully I can share a few thoughts that you can walk away with and remember. I saw something just last week, a video. Someone was, it was kind of an interesting one, a gentleman in front of a judge. And this gentleman, I think it was his father or him, saw this judge speak 20, 30 years ago, however long it was. And he basically said, the judge said, if you could remember, if someone can walk away from a speech or a presentation remembering one thing, you're successful. Well, I hope today that you can remember at least, walk away from here remembering at least one thing, but hopefully multiple. And I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts. Now, that nickname, Godfather of Data Literacy, I did not make it up. I didn't even know it existed at one point. I remember being in a call with someone named Valerie Logan. And she and I were kind of the pioneers who really started talking first about data literacy, getting it out there. She worked for Gartner. I worked for Click. I built the world's first program. And she wrote, I would call the world's first real big article on data literacy. And I was meeting with her once. And she's like, well, you know what your nickname is, right? And I was like, no, or whatever I said. And she said, the Godfather of Data Literacy. I'm still not sure how I feel about it, but we'll go with it. To start off today, I want to share, I like Dilbert comics, and hopefully you can see on your screen in front of you a Dilbert comic where you have Dilbert talking to Dogbert. And Dilbert says, I need to find some data from an unreachable guy named Ed. What should I do? And Dogbert just says, just make up a bunch of data like everyone else does. And Dilbert says, everyone else does that? And Dogbert says, are you doubting my data? It's funny, right? It's funny. Dilbert, though, while it is funny, at the same time, unfortunately, there can be a lot of truth that is found within Dilbert comics. And maybe not this exact example, but experiences just yesterday. So I should clarify, I have a new role since that bio that John Willem shared, and I'm now Vice President and Head of Data and Analytics for a company called Brainstorm. And yesterday I was with them, or meeting with the team, the Customer Success Org, and they were wanted to share with me and the Chief Technology Officer these data gaps that existed. And you listen to them talk about it. And first off, one, whoever prepared the data long ago that they were using in that part of the organization, I don't want to say should be ashamed of himself, but there was no clear direction and no clear, what I would say, they probably had they probably thought they had direction and strategy. But you had, like, for example, this one part of this visualization that our customers and users could see, 5 boxes, I think it was. What they didn't tell you is I believe the first 2 boxes are static numbers. The last 3 are dynamic numbers. So if you change the time filter, the first 2 don't change, the last 3 will, without labels, without tooltips. And they had it just this lack of understanding. And the customer success team, when they would talk to consumers, or customers would find data that made the story not appear too bad. They're cherry picking data, not giving this full picture of what they should be. Neither of those obviously is an okay thing to do. And hopefully today, well, let me share a little bit more about me, and I won't spend too much time. I do look different than that, obviously. I don't like having hair, so I get rid of it. And I kind of have the same beard, probably a lot more white hair in it at this point, though. But I love data and analytics. I love this space. I do like the nickname Chief Nerd Officer better than the Godfather of Data Literacy. I'm a published author, and I appreciate this event and Kogan give me an opportunity to speak. So what are we going to be talking about? I've got about 38 minutes left. I'll probably go for till about 35 after. And I understand that this is the last presentation of the day. I'm sure, or I hope you've had just a splendid, amazing day in this world of data. And I hope being the last session that I can entertain you, but at the same time, give you valuable information. So we're going to talk about threefold things. I want to talk about the world of data. And in essence, what I hopefully will set the stage for as I go through it is this need for data literacy. And because data is just data. Data sits there. It has an amazing purpose. It can be such a valuable tool. But the reality we all have to understand is unless we can move data to insight to decision, it's just data. So hopefully I could share what data literacy is, and in the last section, how do we improve our individual data literacy? So let's jump in. First off, how did I get into data literacy? So I started my career at American Express. Hopefully everybody knows who they are, one of the largest and probably oldest financial service companies in the world. And I was I ran a business intelligence world, if you will, for the US Consumer Card Group. Now at the time, and it probably still is, that is the largest portfolio of charge and credit cards that American Express has. And this is maybe a decade ago, maybe 11 years ago when I took the job. And it was, I would say, probably when the democratization of data, or in other words, giving data to everyone, was kind of really getting its steam. The train was rolling, and we were training people. I was basically put in charge of training the end users on what we were building in my group, or in my world. And the way we trained them is we trained them what was in the dashboard and how to use or filter the dashboard, something like that. What we didn't do is train them how to use data. And you still might see this today with powerful data and analytic tools. We're consistently teaching people how to use tools, but data literacy is how do we use data and analytics? And so I built a training model, didn't call it data literacy, but basically, can we teach these users basic statistics, how to do cooler things with the data? Presented it to my executive vice president, and she told me, no, they're not ready for that, maybe in the future. Neither I nor her understand what I was tapping into. And couple, maybe 1 to 3 or 4 years later, it was in 2016 when Click had a job opening. And it was something like analytics curriculum manager. Basically, I was hired to be an entrepreneur to build this learning of how to do analytics, but from a product agnostic approach. So I didn't even use Click, or I was given a task to build some training on Click, but I eventually said, let's get rid of this and I'm going to focus here. So I sort of worked with the tool, but data literacy was product agnostic. And it took me all over the world. I've traveled to South Africa, Australia, speaking about this. Traveled a lot of places talking about this amazing topic. I don't think I ever imagined it would become what it did. But let's actually now extrapolate from that and talk about the current world of data, maybe some historical context in there and a little future context. And think about these next few slides of how this ability to be confident with data, let's look at data literacy from that vein, taps into these things. To start off, look at this number in front of you. How many of you, if I was in the room, I might ask, how many of you, raise your hands, know how many bytes of data that is? But this is one prediction. This is one prediction I've seen. Another is actually bigger than this. It says 180 plus. This number is 175 zettabytes worth of data, 21 zeros. 175 zettabytes worth of data is the annual data sphere by 2025. Okay, we've got all this data It's amazing. We hear about big data. We've got all these tools and technologies, algorithm, machine learning, data engineer. Wonderful. Problem is, or the end goal needs to be, can I extrapolate out of this massive amount of data effectual or effective information and insight that I can utilize to make a decision? There you go. End of story. Let's go get some drinks if it's nighttime, or I don't drink, so maybe I get my water, we go get. No. The reality is, though, think of data literacy in that vein as empowering everybody with skills and a skill set to find insight on this. So that is our goal. That is what we want. Okay. Now let's think about this world of data. 175 zettabytes. I believe the prediction for the end of 2021 was 50 zettabytes. And if you look at the chart from that, it is exponential, right? Most people probably heard that term more than they ever wanted to during the pandemic, exponential growth. Well, data, if you think about it, is on that trajectory according to that chart. And that was a predictive chart that came out who knows how long ago. What is this world? What is my role? What is everybody's role? So if you're a data professional, right, a data and analytics professional in your job, think about your coworkers who are not data and analytics professionals. For one, you may actually sit there and say, man, I wish they were better with data. It would make my life easier. Think of data literacy. In this, I'm not going to go through all the questions. One of the big questions in the past that I received was, do I have a background that can, like, in data? Like someone with an art history major, an English major, whatever it is. Do I have a background that can use data? Everybody's background has a part with data. Everybody has experience. We need to remember that data is data, and it can help us gather a lot of information. But the human element should not be eliminated. Your experience, your expertise, we should bring those things together. Down the next question, will robots take my job? Let's also remember that through every industrial revolution, more jobs have been created than eliminated. That is the prediction for the one that I would argue is probably still going on, right? And so hopefully through data and analytical expertise or skills, I don't want to say we make ourselves irreplaceable, but hopefully we're developing skills that can interact with the tools and technology that are being built to effectively find insight to make decisions. So let's talk about this just a little bit from this background of how do we want to work with this. We need to take a look at what is the end goal or the end point of utilizing data in our personal lives or career. We got to remember that data literacy is not just for a career. It could be for your personal life too, right? During the pandemic, whether politicians, whomever was putting forward data literacy can help us sift through what was accurate, inaccurate, who was posturing, who was not posturing. In our lives right now, in the United States, inflation is massive right now. Can we decipher through data that is coming in, like food prices, things like that, to help our families or individually make decisions? Data is data. I want you to picture, this says hop on the train. I'm gonna change from a train analogy to, I want you to imagine, I live in Utah. I love mountains. I love to run in the mountains, hike in the mountains, power hike, run races. I want you to imagine that you have discovered a mountain, and we're going to name it the 175 zettabytes mountain. Think of that mountain as gold. Okay, so the entire mountain, we're going to represent all that 175 zettabytes worth of data. Within there is what I'm going to call signal amongst the noise. Okay, we are trying to find insight. That is the gold. We're trying to be able to mine through all of the noise to find the signal, to find the insight. Use analytics, as you see on your screen, to do that. We then find this insight. Like if we find gold, it's not like we find gold sitting in the form of a perfect wedding ring or whatever it is, right? We're transforming it or utilizing it, might be a better way to say that. This part of the analogy is kind of a little washy here. But we need to take that insight. We have found it. Can we transform it or utilize it for a decision? That's what we want to do. Think of data literacy in that vein. We have our mountain of data, so our mountain of gold. We need to extract the gold. That's our insight. We need to take that insight to drive a decision. There we go. Let's just that simplifies this data world for us. So I'm going to focus now on analytics, and I want you to think about data literacy, being confident with data, how it talks about these 4 levels of analytics. And I'm going to use an analogy, kind of like the gold mine, but this one, it's one I utilized before the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, I got rid of it, and hopefully you'll see why. But I brought it back at some point. I want you to imagine that you're sick. Well, that's why I got rid of this analogy. But imagine that you're sick. You go into a doctor. He or she sees you, looks at you, and says, "Yep, you're sick." They leave, never to return. You ever going to go back to that doctor? Well, that doctor, and again, this is simplifying, or maybe not simplifying it as much as the previous slide, but think about it in this way, right? The doctor described that you're sick and left. That's a descriptive analytic, a description of what is happening. Think of this as a data visualization. Think of this as charts, KPIs, reporting. Those are descriptive analytics. But guess what? How many of you would want a doctor to stay and only describe your illness? No, you want them to diagnose, predict, etc. Most businesses aren't doing that, though. They'll build data visualizations, they'll build reports and do all these things. But that's just a small, probably it's an essential part, but we have to get beyond it. Now I want you to imagine that doctor stays and says, "You're sick, here's why." In analytics, imagine getting a data visualization. It's one thing to be like, "Great, I can see the line went up, I can see the line went down, got a scatter plot or whatever. I see a cluster over here versus the big cluster here." Boom, that's it. Well, that's not very effective. Now imagine you can say the line went up, but truly say, not just anecdotal, not just speculation, but truly say why that line went up. That's your diagnostic analytic. What happened? Why happened? And then hopefully when you know why it happened, make choices to make predictions like the doctor, right? You're sick. Here's why. If you do A, B, and C, X, Y, and Z can occur. Sometimes a doctor gives you a prescription. Let's call that an external thing to improve your health, right? Similar in analytics, right? You know what happened, you know why it happened. Let's build some predictions. Let's see how they do. Sometimes we need something external, machine learning, the technology, to prescribe for us what to do. Now, just like doctors, data and analytics does not always get it right? So we need to be iterative. We need to learn. We need to grow. We need to build on. It's circular, right? So we build the prescription. We've got the predictions going through. How does it turn out? Well, it didn't go quite as well as we hoped. It did have some good things. Why did that occur? I can see where we messed up. We didn't include this. Let's include it. Here's the prediction. Oh, we're going to take this external information. Man, it got even better. Can I learn from this? And the cycle can continue. I don't want to say I get frustrated, but that might be the right term around this concept of failing fast and learning. Companies say it, it's a catchy phrase, but a lot of companies don't believe it, truly, right? Instead of saying fail fast, we should be saying, especially in data and analytics, learn fast. Nelson Mandela is a hero of mine, and he had a quote that said, basically to an effect, if I'm not wording it exactly, "I never lose. I win or I learn." Think about that in data and analytics. I never fail. I'm successful or I learn. And we want to do that. We want to learn fast, not fail fast, learn fast and build and model and grow. One more slide in this section here. So what did the pandemic do? I would argue that the pandemic illuminated the need for data literacy maybe more than anything ever in twofold, right? One, all the data that was being shared out throughout the pandemic, finding like there was one model, especially in the US, that was latched onto very early on and it got hammered. And this is it was a university and group highly respected, but it got hammered, or that might be a little hyperbole or whatever, but not proven, but found to not be that accurate or not to be accurate. And one time they just added some numbers in to boot. I mean, we can't do that. So from a data literacy perspective, there we go. And hopefully I shared all that correctly and didn't muddle any of my story there. From another perspective, from a business perspective, pre-pandemic, I was on the road a lot, 1 to 4 times a month. I worked remotely for like 4 to 6 years pre-pandemic. So working from home was not new to me, but not having travel was. So when the shutdowns occurred and when the shutdowns happened, I'm sitting here thinking, man, my calendar is going to open up, on the road 1 to 4 times a month, traveling at different locations around the world. The opposite happened with my calendar, though. I wasn't traveling, but my meetings or my calendar blew up. And what I surmised, or what my thought was, these companies want to be data driven. They wanted to be able to use data. And if you think about it, when a pandemic hits, you've got external information, internal information coming. Being able to use data to survive, to make choices in such a challenging economic and pandemic-driven life, data can be powerful. And I think organizations found they weren't ready to do it. They had wanted to be for years. They talked a big game, but they weren't there. These are just 5 pillars that I derived or put down on, like, what is it to be data driven or data strategy, or however I phrased it. In fact, it was, I believe, the pandemic that got me to write my second book, or this buzzworthy word or term, data driven or being data driven. You need a holistic data strategy. Your strategy and data needs to tie to the business. You need the right tools and technology. You need data literacy. You need culture and change management. Number one roadblock to data and analytics success, culture. And you need leadership. Underpinning all of this is the skills gap. For one, there are not enough people with the skills to fill all the data jobs, I believe is one of the predictions out there, or what is happening. And two, if you think about it, the majority of an organization is not going to be a data and analytics professional, but we expect them to use data. And so think about that. That's the data literacy skill side. So if you, for example, I was going to use tools as an example, but we're going to say a whole organization. Imagine a whole organization has 10,000 employees. What, 200 to 400, maybe 500 are full-blown data and analytics professional. It's part of the title. That's it. So 9,500 plus are not data and analytics professionals, but we need them to use data. There's your data literacy component. So let's talk about this. What in the world is data literacy? So when I was at Click, we used originally a definition that was written by Raul Bargoff and Catherine D'Ignacio that said it's data literacy is the ability to read, work with, analyze, and communicate, or excuse me, their definition was argue with data. And argue with, I think, caused some confusion. I think some people thought it meant you argue with your data, which is wonderful. Be skeptical. Argue with what you're looking at. But there was another side of it, and that was to argue with data is to put a point forward and argue with it or back it up with data. We changed that last phrase or argue with to be communicate. And I like that better. There's many aspects to communicating with data. It is putting an argument forward and backing it up. But it's also, can I communicate? If I'm a non-data professional, but I'm good at asking questions of data, I don't have the skills to get to it. Can I communicate that effectively with the data scientist, data engineer, data analyst? The ability to read data, to me, is the most important that you see on here, to be able to look at data and information and be able to comprehend it. That's what you need to be doing, whether it's a data visualization, whether it's a table with just a lot of data, pivot table. We need to be able to read and look at it. If we can't read and comprehend the data in front of us, can we work with it? Can we analyze it? And can we communicate well with it? Now, one of the things that I want us to all understand, and this right here might be one of those things you walk away with, it's not a one size fits all. Not everyone needs to learn the same skills in data literacy or data and analytics. Okay. Another thing to walk away with from today is not everyone needs to be a data scientist, right? Harvard University, if I'm not mistaken on my date, in October 2012, said the sexiest job of the 21st century, if I've got this quote right, is the data scientist. Awesome, right? Us nerds, like, hey, and whether I want to call myself data scientist or not, but called sexy, that's not happening. Problem with, I think, that caused was companies then went out to find data scientists, went out to hire them. They didn't know what to do with them. Some maybe, but I would argue a lot probably didn't. And so that's probably one of the impetuses why data literacy became what it was. Because after a few years maybe of trying to hire and find these data scientists and probably not getting the return on investment you're looking for, man, there's something else here. And up comes this rolling thunder of data literacy, right? So again, not everyone needs to be a data scientist, but everyone needs to be data literate or have confidence skills, almost that minimal viable product. And the other thing I want to say is you should be a data skeptic, right? That to me is probably a big key to data literacy. Not a data cynic. The world is doing a good job of creating data cynicism. But are you a data skeptic? Are you good, or do you question data? Right? How many of you, if your CEO put data forward, would raise your hand and question it? If not, the culture needs to get there, so that's okay. Questioning data is not bad. Asking why is not bad. Digging in and figuring things out is not bad. But we have to let's develop our confidence in doing that. So how do we do that, right? I'm coming up on the half hour here. How do we be data driven? So book number 1 was Be Data Literate. Book number 2 is Be Data Driven. So this next area is going to be data literacy, but let's extrapolate everything. Let's put everything together to say, I personally, in my career or personal life, am going to be data driven. Now, what that does not mean is that data drives everything. I think that is a true fear that is out there, that when we say be data driven, we think that data will drive everything. Another term you can use is being data informed, right? Let's use those interchangeably. But what we want is harnessing the power of data effectually in our personal lives or career. We don't want to get rid of the human element. Let's keep the human element there, but let's combine it with the data. Sometimes the human element will outweigh the data. The data says one thing, right? I just know it doesn't work. The data is not accounting for this. Sometimes, though, we're going to have to eliminate the human side and say, we got to go with the data. I have too much invested personally in this, so I'm not seeing it objectively. One caution is we're not going to be able to get rid of all personal biases and all things that might drive, but all things like that, or I'm not sure what I was going to say there. So just account for it, right? Account for your personal biases, account for those things that account for your personal biases in your analyses and your decisions, etc. Okay, so what can we do? To start off, in fact, I did a session. It's kind of funny. I did a session this morning at 6 a.m. my time. I'm actually a morning person. Getting up that early, let's rock it, let's do it. And then I'm doing this one, which was 8:45 is when I was to log in. And I think I got in at like 8:46 my time here in Utah, or started to log in. I have a presentation tomorrow at 8 a.m. and then 11 p.m. That's where I'm gonna struggle. But in the session this morning, and this is probably the number one question I get is, how do I start? This screen right here. This is how you start. I think people want to have me say, go to statistics or get good at data visualization. No, I want you to be more curious, ask more questions. When data sits in front of you, when you're looking at something, if your gut is saying that doesn't look right, so freaking ask a question on it. Do it. Don't take it at gut feel. Question everything. I've got 5 kids, as Jan Willem said at the beginning. I don't know how I do. I got a superhuman wife. That's my answer. She is much better than me. But with my 5 kids, I want you to imagine how many questions I get, right? And at times, yeah, they can tell I'm probably frustrated by all the questions. But I hope they have learned from me that I don't ever want them to stop. As adults, for whatever reason, we are not good at asking questions. When our boss says, do this, we just do it. When we take on a new job, we just inherit whatever it is and we do it. Ask questions, question things. Number 2, bring creativity to things, to the data. We have experience, we have gut feel, we have all these things. Bring your human element. 3, I want you to critically think on things, right? We're living in a time, and I hate to say it like this, but critical thinking has kind of been kicked out the door, right? And I say it like this all the time, that social media, it just gives you an article and then it refreshes. Well, I think we technically have to refresh it, but we're given blips, we're given pieces. We're probably given pieces of information, news, whatever, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, through the lens of the person who posted it. Take a step back and critically think on the information that is there. People have agendas, they have narratives. Being data literate, again, they might be right. Whatever is posted might be correct. Whether it is big, deep analysis, whether it's just a quick social media, it could be right. But question it and be like, I wonder if that's correct. Ask the person, did you think about this? Totally okay. There's a great book out there called Deep Work by Newport. One of the top recommended books I would say I give to people. Our brain has capacity for 4 hours a day of deep work. And deep work means digging in or doing deep work. It's not answering emails. Usually it's not going to be necessarily answering a Slack message, a chat in Zoom, or a Teams message. It's not building your PowerPoint. It is shutting things off and digging in and thinking on the information. If you have a process that you are truly wondering, why am I doing this, but you just keep doing it, shut everything down for 2 hours one day and dig in. Critically think on it. This right here, these 3 C's, data literacy. Once you move and start to do this, and you could do these simultaneously or in parallel, then develop some technical skills. In that session earlier, I think the way I answered that question, and maybe I shared it wrong, that the question I think was more around data and analytics, maybe not exactly how to get started overall with data literacy, maybe it was. But I said, now we've gotten the 3 C's, and there's this other data and analytics can be very technical, right? So get these skills going. Another skill to master would be improve your communication. I think that was the first way I answered this question. Get really good with your communication around data and analytics. That can be listening, right? Communication is a two-way street. It's not just what I say. It's, can I listen to people? Actively listen. Put your phone down. Shut the computer screen. If someone comes to you and says, I'm looking at the data, focus in, make eye contact, right? But if you're going on the technical side, what I said was get good at either building or interpreting data visualization. That is a great one. Ben Jones is a great name to follow out there. He's got a company, Data Literacy LLC. I would say I've mentored him a little bit a few years ago, probably when he's getting that going. And he does a great job around interpretation. He's got a good book. I believe it's Avoiding Data Pitfalls. I call it a good book. It's actually, he's got a book. I've I think gone through it or part of it or whatever. He's got a book on avoiding data pitfalls, right? We got to get somewhere around understanding these things. So that's one book I recommend. I haven't finished, but just wait. What I'll do for anybody who connects with me and you want books, I actually recommend a bazillion books. Okay. But dig into these things. Visualization is probably your starting point, I would say, around data and analytics. If you want to get into statistics, make sure you like it. I call it like the New Year's resolution problem people have, right? At New Year's, people set resolutions to do something. A lot of times, one of those resolutions is lose weight or get in shape, be fit. And so what do people do? They start running. Problem is they freaking hate running. So what happens after 3 weeks? Well, they shut down, partially probably because the activity they chose to do, they hated. Well, so don't run, lift weights, walk, swim, bike. Data and analytics is a vast field. You have data science, data analyst, data visualization, data ethics, data governance, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data literacy, statistics, big list of things. Find something that interests you and expand on it. Now, another thing, to be good at data and analytics, I would say means you are good at extrapolating from data, insight, and you make a decision. This is a framework. My friend, he was the one who hired me actually at Click, where I started the whole data literacy journey. But the actual building, my thoughts, of course, were more, the start was at American Express. He has this framework. He has a book out there called Turning Data into Wisdom. I believe it is all around, like, how do you take data and make a decision or insight or doing something with it. Get good at this. Learn how to ask questions. When you ask questions, acquire, as this says, search for the best available data. Find it out there. Analyze it. Apply. Bring your human element to it. Apply your human element to the data, to the analysis, all of it. Announce it. You've got to announce the decision or whatever. Communicate it with the appropriate parties. And then just like the 4 levels of analytics, this circular thing, assess. It's going to be iterative. Is every decision you make going to be golden? Of course not. It could fail miserably. But again, it's not fail fast, it's learn fast. We implemented it, start analyzing the data. After a month or two, like, oh my gosh, we are so off base here. Why? Oh, I found it. That why should hopefully is tied into the ask. I found it. Can I get data for this? Okay, I'm analyzing it. Yes, this is the switch we need to make. Why did I make that bad decision? Ooh, I was too biased. I applied my human element. Hey, team, we've redone the decision. Let's go. And we assess 2 months later, you're more on the right track. It's a process. It is iterative. Remember that. One thing too, I would caution too, is don't get caught in analysis paralysis or perfection paralysis, right? If it's got a 70% chance of happening, like the probability, run with it. Okay. Don't try and get to 99% probability and stuff. You might have, as they call it, overfit the model, or you might have built it in a way that is too biased or things like that. Okay. Finally, 5-step process to being better data-driven. This could be personally or it could be in the business side of things. What am I trying to achieve? Set your outcome. Step 2, build a strategy that helps you achieve that outcome, whether it's data literacy, making a decision, any of those things. Step 3, do I have the right tools? Arm yourself, okay? Unfortunately, I've seen businesses and probably humans in our personal lives, the first thing we do is we invest into data and technology itself, and then we try and force fit that onto people and say that's our strategy. This is the tool, now make everything work with it. Instead, set your outcome, set the strategy, and the way that I used to say it is hopefully then at that point, the tools that you need to make it succeed will fall into place. Step 4, well, you've got the outcome, you got the strategy and the tools. Do I have the right skills to make all these things happen? And step 5, do I have the right environment to make it happen? Right? Does the culture, is it buying in? Are people on board with it? So on and so forth. Putting these things in place is good. And remember, the data element and the human element, you don't have to worry about them, right? I'm also trying to figure out a way to bring that overfit mindset in, and because I don't want to, I want to make sure I'm using it right in that case. But make sure your outcome, your strategy, arming yourself, train yourself, establishing the culture, make sure that everything is okay. Make sure that it's in place. You put this in place, and hopefully you can build yourself into a data literate and data-driven machine. Resources, like it was said, it was Kogan, my publisher, that gave me such an opportunity to be here today. My first book came out last year. It's Be Data Literate, the data literacy skills everyone needs to succeed. Second book comes out in August. August 3rd is when it'll launch internationally. August 30th, I believe, for the US. Pre-order now. And like I think I heard, Jen Willem, that it's 25% off. They've got a code for these books today. So with that, I will turn it back over to you and say thank you. If we have a couple questions, I think I've got, 5 minutes left. And hopefully things are going well and you've enjoyed this. Hopefully you walk away with something. Maybe it's that the sexiest job was the data scientist. Maybe it was whatever. It could have been the overfit comment. It could have been anything. But I hope you've walked away with something. And if I could leave you with something, I will say, don't worry about being a data scientist or too technical. If you're already a data analytics professional, trust me, all of us can improve our skills. If you're not, jump in. And with that, I'll leave it to you, Jan Willem.
Thanks so much, Jordan. This was a really excellent and very, very insightful presentation. I think it resonated with a lot of people. It definitely resonated with me, and I especially liked your comments around the critical thinking part and the filter that people kind of need to start putting on to define for themselves what kind of information is being sent. I also think that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you probably have one more comment, but I see a few questions. If I have a couple minutes, I can answer those.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me quickly moderate. I can put them on the screen. I'll just go in alphabetical order. I think some of the things you've already mentioned briefly, but let's start with, I think, a very valid one, which is how do you differentiate between data literacy and data knowledge?
So think about data literacy to an extent as an application of data knowledge. Data knowledge, I can read and understand things, but with data literacy, we got to go a step beyond that, right? We've got to be able to work with it, manipulate it. We've got to be able to analyze it to find that insight and effectively communicate. Almost that minimum viable product, that MVP of data knowledge would be, yeah, I can read and understand that, but I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to do anything with that. Can I see the strategic picture of everything? Whereas data literacy is applying it, pushing it out, and saying, I'm running with this. And in some cases, that data literacy might just be asking good questions and knowing who to network with. I think that's a key. If you're in an organization and you know who the data scientists are, wonderful. If you don't know who they are, go find them. Because if you are data literate, hopefully you can communicate your question to understand. You're forming a partnership, you're working together, hopefully the culture, all of that. So hopefully that answers that question.
Absolutely. Could I also paraphrase that to say that with data literacy, you should include more soft skills compared to...
Absolutely. Yes. And this is interesting. Real quick on this. With it, I've been asked to mentor a lot of people at college. I say a lot, maybe it's not a lot, but people at university and college. And these will be a lot of times people going into data and they will ask me, what classes should I take? And I think they're wanting me to say, take statistics this, data science that. And it's like, no, your program will do that fine. Instead, I want you to take leadership or study communication or project management, because data knowledge is just data knowledge, but you should possess soft skills, especially like if you're a data professional, that might not be what you studied. Develop them. Please develop.
That's a very, very good, insightful comment. Good. Let's do one or two more. Next question is coming from the, I think your comments around the pandemic. A very interesting question. Would the pandemic have gone differently if people make more data-driven decisions? It's a good question to think about.
It is. So given my title and who I was as this pioneer of data literacy, I was asked early on to write about it or speak about the pandemic, and I refused because it became too political.
Yeah.
And if everybody could take their lenses of whatever political party you support and everything out, everybody was misusing data to a degree, I would say, for agendas, for narratives, etc. I do think there were some people out there trying to get it out there correctly. But the reality was, like, for example, and if I was in a room and we had more time, I'd see who knows this. But and I believe it was rated in some manner the most effective model around COVID, like predicting it, data science, et cetera, was built by a person who had no background in like healthcare, epidemiology. He just went at it and said, can I start studying this? I believe he has been hired by the CDC and WHO and maybe the United Nations, something like that. And I can share a podcast that he's on. And he just went at it from an objective perspective, right? Of, can I look at this objectively? He looked at shutdowns and ineffectiveness of them, because eventually once you open, the virus will just start spreading. And we can see that. I think China has seen that with the shutdown, and then it opens. And it's not that they did it wrong per se. We didn't know. You know what I mean? And that's part of where, unfortunately, and even in the US, we saw that in multiple areas. You shut things down as soon as you open, it spread. And it's not that that's necessarily that people made poor decisions. It was learn fast. I don't want to say fail fast here. It was learn fast. And so it's this, I'm not sure. One thing I'm fond of saying is we can't beat Mother Nature. So that's a good question. How would it have gone differently? Not sure we could have fully eradicated it. But the reality is, I do think if politics and narratives and things like that were pushed aside and people were just using real data, getting biases out, yeah, I do think things could have happened differently. Whether it was from not shutting down as long, or maybe it was fully shut everything down. It could have been, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, it's there. I think that hopefully what we've done is we have seen what doesn't work from this one. So when something else comes along, and because these run about every 50 years, I think it is, if you study every 40 to 50 years, these sort of once in a lifetime pandemics occur. So hopefully in the next, whenever the big thing happens, we've got something that we can do.
Better prepared. Good. I think that's a very good comment. I'd like to kind of close with a final, not so much a question, but a comment, but I kind of wanted to share that with everyone because I think it kind of sums up your talk quite well. And it's from Betsy saying, I love the way it still gets back to our gut and insight to feel it. And I think that kind of summarized your session quite beautifully. For me, it has been a tremendous amount of insight. And I truly want to thank you very much for being our closing session today. It's been a pleasure to meet you and having you part of Big Data Days. And I hope in the future I can call on you again. Definitely gonna recommend everyone here to read the books, pre-order the one. There's only for today and tomorrow, there's a 25% discount on the books. So by all means, make use of that offer that doesn't come across too many times. It's a good way to fight the inflation. Jason.
Awesome.
Good. That, ladies and gentlemen, is going to bring us towards what is already the end of our first day. And I hope that in this first day, you've had a better understanding around how big data, machine learning, and AI is changing or reshaping the way that we live. We've seen already today quite a significant number of speakers. But the good news is that tomorrow we will continue this. So we have another 16 sessions planned for tomorrow. So make sure that if you have the time and in whatever time zone you're in, that you log back in and participate in the day number 2 of Big Data Days, because we still have, again, a full program ranging everywhere from the US to Australia and every country in between. Thanks so much for joining today. I'm gonna close the first day of Big Data Days right now. Thank you so much to all of our speakers, our sponsors, and especially everyone who attended today. Without you, this event would not be possible. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I look